Hey there, Slashaholics. Before we start tonight, I want to say a big thank you to all the patrons of this channel, because without them, the channel would simply not exist. So a very big thank you to Jay Gardner, Michael Clark, The Jersey Devil, Jason Epstein, Alex Vanover, Carl of Cthulhu, Chris Dozier, Cinerenic CAX, EXC3LS10R84, Gucci Solo, Iron Alexa, Jackson Smith, Jordan Nicholson, Callie Gamer Girl 82, Catherine McClear, Katie Sabo, Kodo Bukiya, Transformers Bishoho, Marshall Jenkins, Morgan Cherney, Nick Valcarv, Peyton Loeb, William Schaefer, Yusuf McRae, Alvaro M., Jacob Hill, Jeremy Wilson, KC Hawaii, Liam Anderson, Scar, Donovan Shelton, EGSCW, Landon Turner, Mr. D. Authier, Nick, and Serpenthrop. Thank you all so much. We really appreciate you. And if anybody listening would like to help support the channel to keep it going and growing for years to come, please consider joining our Patreon, making a PayPal or Cash App donation, or even ordering a Cameo video. All the information and links to do any of these is in the description and pinned comment below. We can't monetize the channel here on YouTube, so we really depend on slashaholics like you to keep the channel going. Thank you all so much, and please enjoy tonight's narration of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, the fan novelization by Jeremy Terry. Chapter 7, Diana. The phone was ringing as Diana stepped inside of her home. She had a pretty good idea who it might be, and excitement gave haste to her sore feet. She jogged along the foyer and turned right into her living room. "I'm coming!" she shouted, and then had to laugh at herself. She picked up the receiver, wondering why people thought it was a good idea to yell at the phone, as if the person waiting on the other end might hear them. "Hello? Hi, Mom." The sound of Jessica's voice filled Diana's soul with joy, and she felt some of the worries of the last few days melt away. She smiled. "Hey, baby. I was hoping it was you when I heard the phone ringing. How are things?" "I'm fantastic. Guess what? I got a new boyfriend. You'll never guess who." Diana felt a twinge of sadness as Stephen's face flashed into her mind, but she pushed it away. "Oh, really? What's his name?" "I can't tell you yet," Jessica said, giggling like the giddy schoolgirl she was only a few years before. "I want it to be a surprise." "Is it someone I know?" "No," Jessica said, "but you will recognize him. We're going to come for a visit next weekend. He really wants to meet you." Diana's mood lifted even more at these words. It had been months since she had last seen her daughter and granddaughter. "That sounds great, baby. Hey, give me a second. I have to put the phone down." Diana laid the receiver on the lampstand beside the couch and crossed to the fireplace. She reached inside and turned the knob, igniting the gas burners hidden below fake wooden logs. The warmth coming from the fire sent pleasant shivers through her body. Diana walked back and picked up the phone. She didn't hear when someone opened the front door and came inside. "Sorry," she said as she placed the phone to her ear. "So how is the baby doing?" "She's perfect," Jessica replied. "I think she has your eyes. Have you heard from her father lately?" "Stephen? Yeah, he's coming over tonight. He still asks about you." This wasn't what Jessica wanted to hear. "Mom, I don't want to talk to him, and I don't want to see him when I'm home. But he can see the baby if he wants. Can you tell him?" "I'll tell him." "Thanks, Mom," Jessica said. "I love you." No better words than those ever touched the ear of a mother. She smiled, her heart bursting with the strength of her emotions. "I love you too, baby. Listen, before I let you go, there is something I need to—" Rough hands snatched the phone from her hands and slammed it down into its cradle. Diana whirled around, remembering now that it was too late, that she had forgotten to lock the front door in her rush to answer the phone. Josh stood a foot away. He was still dressed in his deputy uniform, though it was disheveled and stained with some dark fluid, and the shirt was unbuttoned. Something was very wrong. Josh would never disrespect his uniform like that, nor would the sheriff allow it. She looked up into his sunken, bruised eyes and felt her heart stop. A stranger stared out of Josh's face. "Josh," she stammered, "what are you doing here?" A feral growl issued from Josh's throat, and he took her head in both his hands, pulling her face towards his, as though he meant to kiss her. Part of the conversation from the diner that morning ran through her mind, and she shuddered. "One meatloaf with a side of me." Josh's response, "Where was that on the menu? I would have ordered a couple." Surely he was joking when he said that. She had known him for years. He would never do anything to hurt her. "Josh, stop!" she cried, her hands on his face, trying to force him back. She turned her head to the side and caught a glimpse of their reflection in the gilded mirror over the fireplace. The figure that held her on the other side of the mirror was not Josh. He was ghostly pale and hairless, his eyes the color of fresh spilt blood. "Oh, Jesus!" she gasped. "Oh, God!" "Jason, it's Jason. He came for me just like Duke said he would." He turned her face back towards his and opened his mouth wider. Diana saw something thick as a baby's arm squirming up from his gullet. It pushed out between his teeth like a tapeworm from hell, and she understood what he meant to do. The gun in the drawer behind me." Diana dropped one hand from his face to fumble for the lampstand's handle. Her strength was fading fast. She had mere seconds before he would force that thing into her mouth like some macabre demonic form of forced fellatio. She felt the handle, pulled the drawer, and withdrew the .357 Magnum. The worm thing touched her lips, and she began to cry. The sensation of its pressing against her lips was the most loathsome thing she had ever felt. She held the gun to Josh's temple and pulled the trigger. Black bile flew from the wound, and Josh staggered backward, falling to his knees and then his face. Diana wasn't dumb enough to think that one bullet would be enough. She had to run while she had the chance. She spun on her heels and headed for the patio doors on the back wall of the living room. Behind her, the phone began to ring. "That's Jessica," she thought as she reached the sliding glass doors. "She knows something's wrong." It was too bad that Jessica couldn't help her. Nobody could. She had to help herself. She grabbed the door handle and pulled. The door held fast. It was locked. She looked over her shoulder and froze. Josh was missing. She glanced around the room, searching for a sign of movement, any hint of a threat. The phone was still ringing. Maybe it wasn't Jessica after all. What if it were Ed? He could have someone here in minutes, and they could take her away before Josh showed back up. She started across the living room, tears still streaming down her cheeks. Josh leapt from behind the couch and knocked her to the ground, pinning her with his weight. He grabbed her head, twining his fingers painfully into her hair until she felt like she was trapped in a vice. She kicked her feet, trying to propel herself across the carpet, but it was no use. The fight was over. Even now, he was leaning down to give her that most final of kisses. She tried to clamp her teeth together against the invading monster, but Josh forced her jaws open with his fingers. "At least this can end with me," she thought. "He won't have a reason to go after Jessica and the baby if he gets what he wants from me." The worm came down. Down. Stephen knew that something was wrong the moment he pulled up in front of Diana's home. He jumped out of his car, saw the front door swinging open, heard Diana's choked cries coming from inside. He sprinted across the yard, adrenaline flooding his veins, and ran into the house. He reached the living room, saw fresh blood staining the carpet, and Josh straddling Diana. What the actual fuck? He charged around the couch and tackled Josh off of her. Trying to hold on to the crazed deputy was like trying to hold an oiled pig. Josh twisted in his arms, and suddenly Stephen found himself suspended a foot off the ground by his throat. He clawed at the hand holding him up, kicked Josh in the stomach. Josh didn't seem to feel it. The deputy flexed his arms and flung Stephen against the wall like he weighed nothing. Stephen struck hard enough to crack the drywall and fell to the floor in a jumbled heap. Ow, he thought as he slowly rose to his feet. I feel like I just went 3 rounds with Mike fucking Tyson. What the hell? Josh has never been this strong. He climbed to his feet in time to see Josh standing by the doorway into the kitchen. Josh reached inside, pulled a long metal knife sharpener from the wooden block on the counter, and flung it at Stephen. There was a blur of movement, and then Diana was between them. The metal rod punctured her back between her shoulder blades, and she gasped in shock. No, Stephen thought as he caught her slender frame in his arms. It's not real, this can't be happening. Diana went limp and slid to the floor at Stephen's feet. This was wrong. It should have been him that was harmed, him that protected her. He took a step forward to put himself between her and Josh. Josh met him with clenching hands and terrible rage. Stephen ducked under the deputy's grasp and rolled away, coming up next to the fireplace. He reached out and took a poker from the rack beside the mantel. Josh was right behind him, hatred oozing from his very pores. Stephen shoved the poker out, ramming it through Jason's chest. Josh spun away, trying to pull the tool from his body. Stephen followed his progress and gasped when he caught sight of the pale monster in the mirror where Josh should have been. Josh stumbled across the room, tripped and fell headlong through the picture window and out into the night. Stephen waited for the briefest moment to see if the man would climb back inside to continue the fight. When he didn't, Stephen rushed to Diana's side and took her in his arms. She coughed, trying to speak, misting his face with warm droplets of her life's blood. She reached up and placed a shaky hand to his cheek, holding his gaze with a scary, desperate intensity. You saw him in the mirror, didn't you? You know who he is. The mirror, the thing that wore Josh's face. It was impossible. Surely it was a stress-induced hallucination. He hesitated, unsure of everything he'd seen and heard in the last 5 minutes. I saw something, he breathed. The reflection wasn't Josh. What was that? Jason Voorhees, Diana whispered. Her chest hitched, each inhalation taking a great effort. He isn't dead. That's what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. He will go after Jessica now. You have to save Jessica. Save her and the what? Save your... She trailed off, a pink bubble of gore forming at the corner of her mouth. She looked so fragile in his arms, all of her fierce strength gone forever. The woman was supposed to be his mother-in-law one day. She was family. He felt her loss as acutely as he felt Jessica's. Tears stung his eyes, fell shimmering in the firelight, like liquid amber to splash on her cheek. Stephen, she said, her voice so quiet that he had to read her lips. I'm scared. There's nothing to be frightened of, he said. I'm here. You aren't alone. You're going to be all right. But she wasn't going to be all right ever again. Stephen knew it as surely as he knew the sun would rise in the east and set in the west. The light had gone from her eyes. A voice behind him, full of pain. How could a night that began with so much promise be filled with so much hurt? Oh, God Almighty, no! Stephen turned and saw Sheriff Ed Landis standing in the hallway door with his gun held limply at his side. The man was almost as pale as the visage Stephen saw on the other side of the mirror. I have to tell him what happened, Stephen thought. He gently laid Diana down on the blood-stained carpet and turned to the window. It was Josh. He fell outside after... Stephen froze, staring through the ruined window at the glass-strewn grass outside. Josh was gone without a trace. Landis knelt down beside Diana's still form and hugged her to his chest. Oh, my dear God. I don't understand it, Stephen said. He was dead. Josh had to be dead. Finally, Landis looked up from his lost lover and met Stephen's gaze. All the fires of hell seemed to blaze in the grieving man's eyes. Something dawned on Stephen then, and he glanced down at himself. Gore soaked the front of his shirt and jeans, covered him from fingertips to elbow. Something else dawned on him, and he felt a pang of icy fear race through him. We're alone here, he thought. I'm alone with a grieving man who is armed. Easy does it, boss. You don't want to be shot while trying to escape here. Stephen held his empty hands out in front of him, palms out to leave no doubt that he was unarmed. Wait, Sheriff, you can't think that I did this. Landis was silent for a moment, and then he drew a shiny pair of handcuffs from a leather pouch on his belt. Stephen sighed. That was all the answer he needed. Let's go, Landis said. Chapter 8. Jessica Comes Home. Jessica Kimball pulled up in front of her childhood home and killed the car's engine. Behind her, baby Stephanie slept the untroubled sleep of the innocent, undisturbed by the fears and sorrow that plagued her young mother. Jessica leaned against the wheel and rubbed her bloodshot eyes. She had thought she might cry some more when she got here, but found that she had no more tears to shed for the time being. She looked at her daughter's reflection in the rearview mirror and frowned. Mother is the name of God on the lips of little children, she thought. Brandon Lee said that while filming The Crow. If that's true, then I just lost mine. How am I supposed to do this on my own when I still feel like a kid myself? Who am I supposed to call when I need advice? Her mind drifted to Stephen's parents, and she pushed that thought away. She had always liked Mr. and Mrs. Freeman, thought that they would have made great in-laws, but that ship sailed a long time ago. Stephanie needed a father who she could depend on, and Stephen had proven time and time again that he was not that. Maybe her new boyfriend's parents would step up. Robert certainly had. All she had wanted to do was to come apart when she'd heard the news about her mother from Sheriff Landis, but Robert held her together. He had been her rock, her saving grace, and she truly didn't know what she would have done without him the last 12 hours. Stephen, Sheriff Landis said that Stephen killed her mother. Jessica couldn't square that away with the person that lived in her memories. Sure, Stephen was reckless and immature. He was not dependable. These things might make him a bad father, but that didn't add up to him being capable of a brutal murder. But the sheriff said he caught Stephen dead to rights and had no doubts. But there was the image of Stephen's face smiling in her mind. He seemed so gentle. There was no malice in him. Jessica shook her head to clear the thoughts away and climbed from the vehicle. A cool fall breeze blew her hair, and she tucked it absent-mindedly behind one ear. Anyone seeing her standing there would have been struck by how much she resembled her mother. She opened the back and lifted Stephanie's car seat, shouldered the diaper bag, and walked across the leaf-strewn yard and into the house. The familiar ghost of her mother's favorite perfume still hung on the air in the foyer. Jessica moaned, finding she did have some tears left to shed after all. She stepped into the living room and saw Vicky on her knees busily scrubbing at a large red stain on the carpet. It could just be a wine stain, Jessica thought. That's all it is. Just tell yourself that's all that it is. It's wine. It's not your mom's blood soaked into the floor. Vicky felt she was being watched and turned to greet the visitor. She looked cute with her hair pulled back in loose ponytails and dressed in a faded pair of denim overalls. Jessica, Vicky said as she got to her feet and crossed to her friend. I'm so sorry. I wanted to have this cleaned up before you got here. It's okay, Jessica said, wrapping her arms around Vicky, seeking comfort. She trailed off, overwhelmed by her loss and Vicky's simple act of unlooked-for kindness. Would it ever get easier, or would she keep getting blindsided by little things? A soft muffle from the hallway. Vicky disengaged from Jessica and turned to stare at the little baby girl in the car seat. A girl? She asked. She's beautiful. Jessica nodded. Her name is Stephanie. Named after the father, Vicky wondered, but did not say. She stared at Stephanie, and the baby stared back, her blue eyes bright. She has Stephen's eyes, Vicky said. Yeah, I know, Jessica responded. She ran a finger along her baby's cheek, her emotions a tempest trying to tear her apart. Stephen Freeman sat alone in an interrogation room, contemplating the irony of a person with his last name being in custody. The previous night was the longest of his life, and the day was shaping up to be just as bad. He rubbed his tired eyes and moaned. He was exhausted after having been awake all night, but he was sure he wouldn't be able to sleep anytime soon. Why? Simple. He saw Diana's dead body and the pale thing on the other side of the mirror every time he shut his eyes. The door opened and Randy walked in, his expression grim. The deputy had dark circles under his eyes. It had been a long night for him as well. Well? Stephen asked. Randy grimaced. I'm sorry, brother. I have to put you in a cell. Stephen had been half expecting this, but the words still stung. You've got to be joking. I know, Randy said. He put a hand on Stephen's shoulder. But you saw how the sheriff was last night. He's beside himself with anger and pain, and he needs someone to blame. Just be patient and let me talk to him. Could you be patient in my shoes? Randy didn't have an answer, so he helped Stephen to his feet and led him out the hallway. They turned left and rounded a corner, headed towards the bullpen and the stairs to the cell block beyond. Hopefully, Randy said, we won't have to hold you more than a day. I'm going to bust my ass to prove you're innocent, but you have to stay cool or Landis will really kill you. Okay, Stephen? Okay? Stephen didn't hear him. He was too busy staring towards the front of the bullpen, where Jessica and Vicky stood talking. His heart did a weird somersault in his chest, and a half-remembered line from Shakespeare came to mind. Did my heart love till now? For's where it sight, for I never saw true beauty till this night. Jessica turned then, and Stephen felt his center of gravity shift with her, as if she and the bundle she held in her arms were what now held him to the earth. An image flashed into his mind. Jessica sitting in the passenger seat of his vehicle after they had nearly wrecked. She held her hands over her belly as if she were protecting something. Or someone. That's Jessica's baby. My baby! Why didn't anyone tell me? A door opened behind her, and a familiar-looking man walked in and put his arm around Jessica. Stephen felt rage burn him. If it isn't Mr. American Case File himself, Robert Campbell. What the hell is he doing with Jessica? Campbell met his stare and pulled Jessica closer to him, grinning across the room at Stephen. Stephen started to walk towards them, but Randy pulled him away, forcing him down the stairs and along a hall to a set of dimly lit cells. Randy opened the cell, removed Stephen's handcuffs, and then slid the cell door closed. Stephen seethed, rubbing his chafed wrists and wishing he could claw his way through the roof to get at that usurping reporter. Take a breath, Stephen, Randy said. I'll be back later. You just be cool. Stephen took a deep breath and then sat on the edge of his bed to show just how cool he was. I gotcha. I mean it. Don't do anything stupid. What am I going to do? Stephen asked, waving his hand around. I'm locked in a frickin' cell. I'm going to get you out of this, Randy said. I swear it. Just hang tight. Okay. Okay, Randy said, as he turned and strode off down the hall. That's your great hope? Muttered a voice from the cell adjacent to Stephen's. It was another familiar face. I suppose so, Stephen said. Creighton Duke chuckled. Boy, you are going to die of old age in this joint. Stephen lay back on his bed, afraid that Duke might just be right. Jessica, Campbell, and Vicky stood outside Sheriff Landis's office. Jessica handed Stephanie and her diaper bag to Vicky. Everything you need is in the bag, Jessica said. The white bottle is 12 o'clock, the green bottle is for 1 or 1:30. And work our way up to hard liquor at dinner time, Vicky laughed. Don't worry about Steph. You've got other things to be thinking about right now. Jessica ran a hand through her hair, sighing. Yeah, you're right. What time would you like me to pick her up? Come by the diner around 8. Okay, thank you so much, Jessica said. She turned and planted a kiss on her baby's head. Bye, sweetheart. Stephanie gurgled in response. Jessica watched Vicky walk away with her world, and then she leaned into Campbell's warm embrace. Are you ready for this? Campbell asked. Jessica shrugged. I guess so. The sheriff said he had some paperwork for me to look at and sign. Campbell frowned. Is this really the right time for this? It seems a little insensitive to me. He's not trying to be. Remember, he lost someone important to him, too. Campbell nodded and held the office door open for her. They found Landis sitting behind his desk, staring off into space. He looked up when they entered and gave them a weak smile. Hey, Jessica, he said, stepping around his desk to give her a fierce hug. How are you holding up? Shitty, she whispered, as fresh tears flowed down her cheeks to dampen his uniform shirt. Me too, he said, his voice thick with his own muffled sobs. Jessica wondered, was this the first time the strong man had allowed himself to be weak? They stayed like that for a minute, and then Landis pulled away and got both of them tissues. Ed, she said, blowing her nose, I'd like you to meet my boyfriend, Robert Campbell. Ed Landis. The men shook hands, Landis trying to take the measure of the younger man. I've seen your show, Mr. Campbell. I like it about as much as I like anything else that's on TV. Thank you, sir. I don't mean to sound offensive, but I hope you aren't down here on business. I wouldn't take kindly to seeing Diana's face on one of your programs. Campbell put an arm around Jessica's waist. No, sir. I'm just here for Jess. Landis opened his mouth to say something else, but stopped when the intercom on his desk buzzed into life. He reached across and depressed a button. Yes? Static filled the air, and then the voice of Deputy Dill came from the speakers. Sheriff, we have a problem with Diana Kimball's body. Shit, he muttered as he snatched up the handset on the side of the intercom. Diana's daughter's heard that. What's the problem? The sheriff paused for 15 seconds and then growled. Bring the bounty hunter to me. I want to talk with him right now. What's wrong? Jessica asked as he switched the intercom off. He smiled, trying to comfort. It's nothing for you to worry about. The funeral home just has a few questions. Wait here for me. I'll be right back. He didn't wait for a response before storming from the office. Jessica was speechless as she watched him go. Landis was beside himself with anger, confusion, and a soul-deep ache he thought would never fade. He felt adrift in a stormy sea with no way to steer or right his ship. He put a hand to his pants pocket and grasped the small box inside, like a drowning man clutching for a life jacket. Just another day or maybe two, he thought. I would have given you this ring. We would have been really happy together. Now I'll never be happy again. He turned the corner towards a group of interrogation rooms and saw a restrained Creighton Duke standing nonchalantly in the open doorway of one. Young Deputy Dill stood nearby with balled-up fists resting on his hips in his best "don't F with me" pose. Landis thought the man looked like a kid pretending to be Superman. He would have laughed if he wasn't so close to crying. Duke glanced over at the deputy and smiled as if he didn't have a care in the world. Where is she? Landis demanded, walking up and poking the bounty hunter in the chest. What did you do with Diana's body? Duke frowned. Why, Sheriff, whatever do you mean? I've been locked up in your fine accommodations downstairs since before your lady's untimely passing. Landis clenched his fist in impotent rage. He wanted to destroy something, and the smug, self-important prick before him would serve nicely. He raised his fist and then let it fall to his side. Hitting Duke wouldn't help him find Diana. It wouldn't even help him feel better. Duke raised one eyebrow as if to ask, "Was that it?" He seemed disappointed. "Tell me what's happening around here," Landis said. "There is something you aren't saying." Duke glanced away. "Sorry, but I can't say. Information like that is very expensive, and you don't have the balls to pay." "Try me." "Not a chance," Duke said. "You might as well lock me back up. Your piss-poor little jail is like a five-star hotel to me. Besides, you'll come running to old Duke soon enough, once the shit really hits the fan. We'll talk then, when you are ready to listen." "You son of a bitch," Landis breathed. He turned to Dill. "Take him back to his cell." Deputy Dill grabbed Duke's bicep. "Come along, Mr. Duke. Your accommodations will wait." Duke planted his feet, refusing to move. He studied the sheriff for a second and came to a decision. He smiled again, amused with the world. "I will give you one piece of advice. You incompetent dickheads better find her body right away, because if it's where I think it is, everyone is in for a world of pain." "Fuck you," Landis said. Duke turned away, allowing himself to be led. "Toodaloo, Sheriff. I'll be seeing you." Landis watched them go, and then walked back towards his office, unsure of anything, full of an impending sense of doom. Okay, Slashaholics, this has been chapters 7 and 8 of Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday, the fan novelization by Jeremy Terry. Really enjoyed tonight's chapters. We got a more detailed scene with the Deputy Josh being possessed by Jason. And the thing I really think is cool about that is Jason's original name in the original script for the first Friday the 13th was going to be Joshua, which I always thought was cool myself, being a Joshua. But, you know, in Jason Goes to Hell, we get Jason as Joshua. So that's pretty neat. But getting into Diana's head a little bit, what she's dealing with, you know, missing her daughter, you know, feeling bad that her daughter's got a new man, Steven's wanting to step up and everything, you know, and then just to have her brother show up in, you know, wearing the meat suit of somebody she knows really well, and that person, you know, trying to kill her and succeeding in the end. Just really fucked up. You know, Steven was almost the one to go. You know, Jason kind of fucked up in that moment by letting himself get to that point where he throws that thing and she steps in front of it, because that took away his chance to pass on the worm to his sister. But really enjoyed that chapter. I thought it was written very well. We got a little bit into Steven's head, you know, as he slowly realizes he's going down for this, even though he did nothing wrong, and him trying to come to terms with seeing Jason in the mirror. And I like that Jeremy didn't just say, you know, a man wearing a hockey mask with a bulbous head and the blue shirt and pants. You know, he's going with what Jason would probably really look like. You know, the movie could only do what, you know, so much with their budget, so they had to put Kane Hodder in the same costume he was in whenever he died. So I kind of hope that when Jason is reborn later in the story, perhaps he won't, you know, pop out being the same Jason, you know, that was at the beginning of the book after he killed me, Alex, and Sean and took our clothes. But yeah, really enjoyed Chapter 7. And Chapter 8 was fun. We got to really get into the heads of some characters here like Landis and Jessica. And we got some more of the Duke. I love Creighton Duke. The character's a lot of fun. I decided when I started narrating this book, I was never going to be able to do a good Creighton Duke voice. So I'm just doing my own version of Creighton Duke, you know. And I hope it's okay. The character is very charismatic, but very much a smartass. Secretive, but, you know, kind of heroic, even if it's like an anti-hero thing. So I'm hoping we get a little backstory on Creighton Duke going forward. When I come back to this book very soon, it's going to start with Interlude 3 from the Journal of Elias Voorhees. I'm excited about that. And, I hope some of you that are listening to this that don't really care for Jason Goes to Hell might rethink that opinion a little bit, because honestly, Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X are two of my personal favorites. They're at the top for me, because they took chances, they added to the lore, but still at the center of everything, they're really good Friday the 13th films. So please let me know what you thought of tonight's chapters. Give Jeremy a big thanks for writing this. He's doing an amazing job. And he talked to me earlier about a secret project he's got coming up. An original book he's going to write that's going to put two big-time slashers together in the same story. I ain't going to give nothing away, Jeremy. But I'm excited about it, and I think people are going to love it too. And if you haven't done so already, I'm actually writing my second original slasher book for the channel. This one is called Celestial Slumber, a Nightmare on Elm Street story. It's essentially Freddy Krueger in space, Freddy X, whatever you want to call it, but it's a lot more than that. And it's got some great characters, some great story, some creepy stuff coming up. Freddy in the Nightmares is going to be about 85% Part 1 and 2 Freddy, and like 10 to 15% MTV Freddy, just enough here and there, So he's going to be very sinister. In the prologue, he's a little more fun, but when he starts mixing it up with the characters and their nightmares, it's going to get pretty sinister. He's going to have some dark moments, so it's here on the channel as well. I've put out a few chapters. I'm still writing it and releasing as I finish the chapters. I think you'll like it if you're a Freddy fan. If you do give it a shot and listen to it here on the channel, be sure to start with the prologue. The best bet is to just hit up the playlist for the book. And also, if you're a patron of the channel, you can get early access to chapters of Celestial Slumber and early chapters of Jason Goes to Hell in ebook form before the narrations for those chapters ever hit the YouTube channel. So that's pretty cool too. Alright, until next time, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, be excellent to each other, and remember, the sun never sets on those who ride into it. We'll see you next time.